Okay, how's it going, everybody? So, we're going to read some more Karl Marx. This is another letter about the Civil War. Not a letter, but an article on the Civil War. He wrote letters with Engels, too, on the Civil War, but these are not those. These are the articles he released in the press, namely the New York Tribune in the United States as well. So, let's go ahead and let's get into this. This is written in 1862. This is called a London Workers' Meeting. It's kind of an important part to understand about Marx during the Civil War. He the capitalist press was in England was seriously thinking about invading the United States because they had for one, they helped kind of proxy the Confederacy, and when the Union began to win, they thought about invading and helping the South succeed. But the workers, on the other hand, weren't really with it. And Marx was, kind of a well-known. I guess he was a. He's Marx. He's Marx. So he was the writer for he was a writer for the working class, obviously, during that time. So this is uh this was first published in February the 2nd, 1862. Let's go ahead and get into this. It's London, January 28th. So I might have wrote it on January 28th, but it was released February 2nd. Let's go ahead and get into it. The working class, so preponderant a part of a society that within living memory has no longer possessed the peasantry, is known not to be represented in Parliament. Nevertheless, it is not without political influence. No important innovation, no decisive measure has ever been carried through in this country without pressure from without. Whether it was the opposition that required such pressure against the government, or the government that required the pressure against the opposition. By pressure from without, the Englishman understands great extra parliamentary popular demonstrations, which naturally cannot be staged without the lively participation of the working class. Pitt understood how to use the masses against the Whigs in his anti-Jacobin war. The Catholic Emancipation, the Reform Bill, the abolition of the Corn Laws, the 10 Hours Bill, the war against Russia, the rejection of Palmerston's conspiracy bill, all were the fruit of stormy extra-parliamentary demonstrations, in which the working class, sometimes artificially incited, sometimes acting spontaneously, played the principal part only as a persona dramatis, only as the chorus or, according to the circumstances, performed the noisy part. So much the more striking is the attitude of the English working class in regard to the American Civil War. The misery that the stoppage of the factories and the shortening of the labor time, motivated by the blockade of the slave states, has produced among the workers in the northern manufacturing districts is incredible, and in daily process of growth. The other component parts of the working class do not suffer the same extent, but they suffer severely from the reaction of the crisis in the cotton industry on the other industries, from the curtailment of the export of their own products to the north of America in consequence of the Morrill tariff, and from the loss of this export to the south in consequence of the blockade. At the present moment, English interference in America has accordingly become a knife and fork question for the working class. Moreover, no means of inflaming its wrath against the United States is scorned by its quote unquote natural superiors. The sole great and widely circulating workers' organ still existing in Reynolds' newspaper has been purchased expressly in order that for 6 months it might reiterate weekly in raging diatribes the ceterum censeo of English intervention. The working class is accordingly fully conscious that the government is only waiting for the intervention cry from below, the pressure from without, to put an end to the American blockade and English misery. Under these circumstances, the persistence with which the working class keeps silent or breaks in silence only to raise its voice against intervention and for the United States is admirable. This is a new brilliant proof of the indestructible staunchness of the English popular masses, of that staunchness which is the secret of England's greatness, and which, to speak in the hyperbolic language of Mazzini, made the common English soldier seem a demigod during the Crimean War and the Indian insurrection. The following report on a great workers' meeting that took place yesterday in Marylebone, the most populous district of London, may serve to characterize the quote-unquote policy of the working class. Mr. Stedman, the chairman, opened the meeting with the remark that the question was one of a decision on the part of the English people in regard to the reception of Messrs. Mason and Liddell. Quote, "It has to be considered whether these gentlemen were coming here to free the slaves from their chains or to forge a new link for these chains." End quote. Mr. Votes, quote, "On the present occasion of the working class dare not keep silent. The two gentlemen are sailing across the Atlantic Ocean to our country are the agents of slaveholding in tyrannical states. They are in open rebellion against the lawful constitution of their country, and come here to induce our government to recognize the independence of the slave states. It is the duty of the working class to pronounce its opinion now. If the English government is not to believe that we regard its foreign policy with indifference, we must show that the money expended by this people on the emancipation of slaves cannot be allowed to be uselessly squandered. Had our government acted honestly, it would have supported the northern states' heart and soul in expressing this fearful rebellion." End quote. After a detailed defense of the northern states and the observation that, quote, "Mr. Lovejoy's violent tirade against England was called forth by the slanders of the English press," end quote, the speaker proposed the following motion. Quote, "This meeting resolves that the agents of the rebels, Mason and Slidell, now on the way from America to England, are absolutely unworthy of the moral sympathies of the working class of this country, since they are slaveholders, as well as the confessed agents of the tyrannical faction that is at this very moment in rebellion against the American Republic, and the sworn enemy of the social and political rights of the working class in all countries." End quote. Mr. Wynne, or Mr. Wine, it's WHYNNE, supported the motion. It was, however, self-understood that every personal insult to Mason and Slidell must be avoided during their stay in London. Mr. Nichols, a resident, quote, "of the extreme north of the United States," end quote, as he announced, who was in fact sent to the meeting by Messrs. Yancey and Mann in the Advocatus Diaboli, protested against the motion. Quote, "I am here because here freedom of speech prevails. With us at home, the government has permitted no man to open his mouth for 3 months. Liberty has been crushed not only in the South, but also in the North. The war has many opponents in the North, but they dare not speak. No less than 200 newspapers have been suppressed or destroyed by the mob. The Southern states have the same right to secede from the North as the United States has to separate from England." End quote. Despite the eloquence of Mr. Nichols, the first motion was carried unanimously. He now sprang up afresh. Quote, "If they reproach Messrs. Mason and Slidell with being slaveholders, the same thing would apply to Washington and Jefferson, etc." End quote. Mr. Beals refuted Nichols in a detailed speech and then brought forward a second motion. Quote, in view of the ill-concealed efforts of the Times and other misleading journals to misrepresent English public opinion on all American affairs, to embroil us in war with millions of our kinsmen on any pretext whatever, and to take advantage of the perils currently threatening the Republic to defame democratic institutions, this meeting regards it as the very special duty of the workers, since they are not represented in the Senate of the nation, to declare their sympathy with the United States in their titanic struggle for the maintenance of the Union, to denounce the shameful dishonesty and advocacy of slaveholding on the part of the Times and kindred aristocratic journals, to express themselves most emphatically in favor of the strictest policy of non-intervention in affairs of the United States, and in favor of the settlement of all matters that may be in dispute by commissioners or arbitration courts nominated by both sides, to denounce the war policy of the organ of the stock exchange swindlers, and to express the warmest sympathy with the strivings of the abolitionists for a final solution of the slave question." End quote. This motion was unanimously adopted, as well as the final motion. Quote, "To forward to the American government per medium of Mr. Adams a copy of the resolutions framed as an expression of the feelings and opinions of the working class in England." End quote. Okay, yeah. So that was a London workers' meeting that the article about, this is the article that Karl Marx wrote in 1862 about how the, I guess there's a political meeting. And I'm trying to see the following part of the great workers' meeting that took place yesterday in Marylebone, the most populous district of London, may serve to characterize the policy of the working class. So yeah, called a Great Workers Meeting. Well, yeah, well, thank y'all for tuning in. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, Medium. All of these are Marxists. Y'all can hit me up there. Y'all have a great day. And do Goy.